Good afternoon, and welcome to the July 23rd meeting of the Lincoln City Council. Let's all rise for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of the business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those in opposition. The applicant may make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating their name, address, and whether they're speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any item, any issue on the agenda for that Anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. Teresa, would you help us by calling the first item today, please?
Yes, a couple of announcements. I guess just one announcement. Our public hearing for July 30th for the public hearing on the budget will begin at 2:30 p.m. Also, those giving testimony are asked to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium and to spell their name and give their address. Our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Anyone here to speak on those items? Any discussion amongst the council? Let's-
All right, if not, we can vote on these items.
let-
Item 1A and 2A and B were introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
You have a motion by Councilman Camp, a second by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen is absent. Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next then,
Yes, please.
our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their name and address. I'll call items 4A and B together. They are the application of Fucor Inc., doing business as Scottish Rite by Venue, for a Class C liquor license at 332 Centennial Mall South, and the related manager application of Mike Ritter.
Is there someone here to testify on these items? Mr. Ritter, anyone?
They did confirm they were going to attend. They might just be running late.
So let's move to the next item then. Maybe
Okay.
they'll-
Next then would be items 4C and D. They're the application of Roland Investments LLC, doing business as Lucky's Lounge and Grill, for a Class C liquor license at 1101 West Bond Street, and the related manager application of Chelsea Norval.
Is there someone here? Please come forward. Thank you. I was worried there for a moment. We're going to go 0-2.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Chelsea Norval, 166 Mormon Trail, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Ms. Norble, would you tell us about your application? Why are you?
Yeah, I am applying for the liquor license for Lucky's Lounge and Grill and as liquor manager.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from the council? Anyone in the audience who would like to testify on this item? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next is item
You have a
4E.
question, Councilman Esther? Okay. Yes, please, continue.
Item 4E, manager application of Aaron Stitt for Courtyard by Marriott Lincoln downtown Haymarket at 808 R Street. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Aaron Stitt. I represent the Courtyard by Marriott Hotel in downtown Haymarket in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm the general manager there. My personal address is 1300 Oak Prairie Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska. I am just replacing the previous applicant of the manager for our liquor license. So used to be the food and beverage manager, and now I'm taking that role of applying for the liquor license for our hotel.
Thank you. Councilman Eskridge, did you have a question on this one? Does anyone else have a question of this applicant? Anyone in the audience have a question or would like to address this issue? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Teresa, what's our next item?
All right, next are items 4F through M. They're application of Honest Apes for a Class I liquor license at 900 North 70th and the related manager application. Honest Abe's for a Class I at 2662 Cornhusker Highway, Suite 9, and the related manager application. Application of Honest Abe's Glen Oaks for a Class I at 8340 Glen Oaks Drive, Suite 104, and the related manager application. And the application of Sebastian's Table Glen Oaks for a Class C liquor license at 8340 Glen Oaks Drive, Suite 100, and the related manager application. Hi, raise your right.
Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I'm Eric Hustad. I'm a co-owner of Honest Abe's and soon to be Sebastian's Table. We're applying for liquor licenses for two of our current Honest Abe's that don't have one, so we can kind of round out our concept there. And then for the new Honest Abe's location in Southeast Lincoln at Glen Oaks and the Sebastian's Table concept as well. So one fell swoop.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilman Camp.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Just to clarify, you have two applications at your Glen Oaks, one under Sebastian's Table, one under Honest Abe's. Are they going to be in tandem, or how's that going to work?
No, they're existing as pretty much completely separate restaurants. We're just building them out and opening them up pretty much at the same time. They will share a little commons area in the back, kind of like a hallway, just, for vendors to come through and stuff like that, but
Will that hallway be licensed?
I believe it is, yeah. And I think it's on the Honest Abe's side, so that's actually technically considered Honest Abe's leasable space or whatever, I believe, so.
And pardon me, are Honest Abe's and Sebastian's Table have the same ownership?
We do have the same ownership structure right now, yep.
Are they the same entity or two different entities?
Two separate entities, so.
I was going to say, being adjoining like that, you could use just one liquor license and save some money.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Well, we kind of wanted to keep them as separate as possible for lots of reasons, just because, we've had, previous concepts not work out. And so we thought, well, kind of gives us a chance to cut our losses if we had to, so,
Good luck.
thank you.
Other questions from the council? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Hearing no one? Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, next
Teresa, yes, our next item, please.
is item 4N, application of North American Martyrs Catholic Church for an SDL to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 200 feet by 200 feet at 1101 Isaac Drive on August 17th from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Is there anyone in the audience here to testify on this item? Seeing no one?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a couple of motions. First, I would move that we carry over 1 week items 4A and 4B and 4N.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Camp and a second one by Councilwoman Lamb to carry over 4A, 4B, and 4N.
N is in Nancy.
Is there any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of items 4C through 4M as in Mary.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilwoman Lamb. We have questions from,
Items 4C and D, item 4 had a recommendation from the city attorney to add a condition. I was hoping I could add to that item.
Okay, should we separate them so we can discuss that?
That makes
Okay,
sense.
so,
why don't we just make my motion for items 4E through 4M?
Second.
Motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilwoman Lamb. Any discussion on 4E through 4M? Teresa, would you call the roll for us, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
And now we'll return to C and D.
And Mr. Chair, I would, just to put it on the floor so we can have discussions, I'll move approval of items 4C and 4D.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Camp and a second by Councilwoman Lamb to approve 4C and D. Discussion.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ms. Eskridge.
our letter concerning this application from Chief Blymeister suggested that a condition be put on this approval that there be no personal alcohol or drug-related violations for Scott Rowland for a period of 1 year from the issuance of the license.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Think friendly amendment, it just needs to be an amendment, right? We just need to have a motion for that.
Correct.
Before we do that, Councilwoman Gaylor Baird,
That
would you?
was the
Same.
conditions. I'll second if Carl makes that motion.
We
I'll
have a
second.
motion by Councilman Eskridge and a second by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird to add a restriction that be no violations for 1 year. Any discussion from the council? Would you call the roll, please?
This is on the motion to amend. Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
And now let's return to the original motion. Any additional discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Madam Clerk, do you want me to sign, or do you need to get me a revised?
No, go ahead and sign it. We'll make the amendment
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Next, we have public hearing resolutions.
Yes. I'll call item 5A, approving amendment number 1 to the construction engineering services agreement between the city and Alfred Benish for the South Coddington Avenue and West Van Dorn Street intersection safety project.
Good afternoon, Council. Thomas Schaefer, Project Delivery Division Manager, appearing on behalf of Public Works. We have before you our consultant who was working on construction inspection for that project. We needed to amend their contract because the approval for a borrow pit for the dirt on that project was delayed through different government agencies taking their time to ensure they've gone through the proper things. And because of that, they've expended time and effort during that process. And so we would like to compensate them for that time that they did. They're due that. Be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Question, Mr. Councilman Eskridge?
Yes. Thomas, what's the status of the project?
The status is, barring any rain that would interrupt our operations, we hope by the end of the week to have traffic going in all 4 directions of that intersection. There may be some minor daytime lane closures as we do some seeding, do a little cleanup, install some of the signing, etc. But for the most part, traffic will be flowing, I hope, by Friday.
It's good news. It's been a long time coming, and sure
Definitely.
residents will look forward to it, and Pinewood Bowl folks as well.
And my kids will, and be sure to hit me up too, since they like to go to those corners occasionally after ball games for
All right.
eating and other treats.
Good.
Other questions from the council? Anyone in the audience like to speak to this issue? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next is item 4B, approval of a purchase agreement between the city and American Nebraska Limited Partnership for the M Street Parking Garage, generally located at 1318 M Street, and including the assumption of the lease obligations for the underlying real property.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, the applicant in this case. I am, in fact, not going to ask you on this second of 3 dates for this to vote on the material that I've given you, because we're not done working on the agreements. There is a necessity for time that has occasioned this odd outcome. And at the moment, we're operating on an important element of this agreement, which is to be able to exercise an option for a very cost-effective purchase of some land. That option is August 1st. I can tell you that the parties are working to see if we can get an extension so that the council can have more time and we can have more time. And we're hopeful that that will occur. But the material that's given to you is not the final language, as you know. However, I would like to describe both the short and the long-term strategy that we have for this location. And what we, in this agreement or its successor with the blanks filled in and the final terms available to you, what it is designed to do. This is an existing garage in which the garage is owned by the owners of the Sharp Building, the physical garage itself. And it rests on land that is owned by St. Mary's Parish. This has a 33-year lease that, in fact, it was longer. In fact, it was a 90-some-year lease. This garage has existed for 60 years. And so they are 2/3 of the way through a very long lease. This land is owned by a bank. It is, however, leased by the Sharp Building folks, and it contains a proposal to buy this land for $1 million. And that opportunity is, at the present time, to be occasioned by notice on August 1st, followed by completion of that $1 million transaction by the end of the year. So notice needs to be given. At this time, it's August 1, although we're hoping for a 30-day delay. And then money needs to change hands before the end of the year. The agreement that's before you is buying out the rights of the Sharp Building in this property, buying out the ownership of the garage, which has been appraised at $3.2 million roughly, and this amount of land as well. And the total price for the garage at 3.2 and for this land, the total is 5.5. The $1 million of land that we would get, or that's to say the $1 million that we would expend for the exercise of the option would give us that amount of land. When you take a look at this land, which is now a surface parking lot, and you compare it to the appraisals that we've done on the block that is to the south, the amount of land is almost identical to this amount of land, except it's an entire half block this way. And the appraisals on that block were for $2.3 million. One of the ways to take a look at that then is that we're buying a garage that's valued at 3.2, and we're doing land which very similar land has been appraised at 2.3. In other words, it comes up to essentially the amount of money that we're offering to get these rights. There's a missing piece. The missing piece is we need to have an underlying agreement with the church, and we're in negotiations with them. This week will be an important week in that. What we suggested to them is that we end this 33-year lease decades early, and that we swap for ending this lease, which, by the way, is for $10,000 a year. And as you can imagine, this much downtown land leased for $10,000 a year is a bargain. But if we could end that 23 years earlier or more, we would offer to swap land with the church. They'd get back this land and 23 years of use of it without the lease, and we would demolish the garage that's on there, and that we would own this piece of property. It wouldn't add to the cost. It would take the demolition costs that we would undoubtedly want to do, because the garage we want to build is essentially here. This is the only footprint of the downtown area that would give us a 3-bay garage, which is the most efficient way of getting the most parking on land that you can get. We anticipate going up at least 6 floors. Our current estimates are for 900 stalls in that garage, although we don't have a height limit. And in the event we have the resources to go higher, we would choose to do that if we could. So, what you have before you is the $5.5 million work that we're doing with the Sharp building. There are 3 elements to that agreement that are not yet now completed. One of them is their desire to have some parking rights in the space. The desire to make sure there's bridge parking so that people who work in the Sharp building and who will lose their parking while this is being built will be able to find a spot someplace else in the city system. And there needs to be some space for the duplicate generators that are there, which we can find in some of the space that we don't need in the garage or that we can make space for in the garage. Those 3 issues are why the document you have before you isn't complete. The numbers aren't in discussion, but some of the terms are, and that's why we're not done with that. There are 2 strategies, a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy for parking. By the way, there are parking garages in all of the other quadrants of downtown. The one quadrant that needs parking is the southeast quadrant, 13th and O, and south and east of there. We've identified 3 locations and pursued all of them as arduously as we can. They vary in their amount of cost. They have various virtues and vices. Other locations, one of the other locations has a very real expectation that the only way to secure it would be through eminent domain, and this body and the administration generally is wary of using that tool. A second location has limitations in height, and to get a substantial number of stalls would require 3 rounds underground. When you go the first round, it's 50% higher per stall. In the second one, it's 100% more expensive than a stall, and the third is even higher. We would be building, if we did that garage, $60,000 stalls in the bottom floor. We don't want to do that, and it's very proximate to state government. The most compelling users for that will be city employees, or rather, let me say that's state employees. It's further away from O Street. It's further away from N Street. It's further away from M Street, where our retails and our employers are that we most want to service. So the further you get away from that area, the more distance users have to walk. And by the way, parking garage users have a pretty well evidenced preference, and they will walk 750 feet to a garage, and past that they want another garage closer. So you can't really just hope to put them wherever and expect people to use them. There are garages that are built and then not filled because the public doesn't want to use them at that proximity, and only when demand becomes overwhelming will they make use of less desirable spots. This is the strategically best spot for a southeast quadrant downtown garage. The long term then is to fill a 3-bay garage in this area and go up as high as we can afford to go. Our current estimations with demolition, site acquisition, and building is roughly $25 million. But there is the need to design and construct this, and we will have some rather immediate needs. We have about 100 people who are in city garages that would like to be in a different city garage. We have several hundreds of people who'd like to be in a city garage. There is this garage which has a life to it, but it is in decline, and significant decline. It's 60 years old, and the maintenance has not been good in recent years. More compellingly is this area, which is across the street and is the Eagle Parking Garage. It has substantial strength in its vertical structure, but not in its horizontal structure. We will be within, I don't know how to say it, a year, maybe 2 years, where this garage will come out of use and will not be available for a garage. I can't imagine somebody buying and reinvesting in the garage when, in fact, once they acquire it, they'd have a development site and hope to have parking someplace else, which is what private sector folks do downtown. They want to build a building and they want to use city parking. We would like to acquire this, and we'd like to make those transformations. We believe there are 20 years of life in that structure if you do repairs that are substantial. But the virtue is that can be done quickly and immediately add to the resources of the city. And we also think that our position for holding and using this garage for a period of time, an unknown period of time, but for some period of time, a couple of years, 3 years, would give us this resource, and the Eagle parking for dealing with immediate needs. There will be a significant difficulty when this area gets put under construction for a new garage, and we will probably have to shuttle people to other surface garages or city garages, as the case may be, as we make place for this area for a large garage. So there's a shorter term operation in which the city takes over control of this land and this garage, manages them, improves their efficiency, and harmonizes them into the city system, and hopefully also takes over the Eagle Garage and repairs it. Let me tell you what the cost of those pieces are. You know the cost of the land here, it's 5.5. You know our offer to the church, which is to swap land and get them back into the business of owning some prime development land without a garage 23 years early, which is, I think, a very substantial amount of value. So for this cost, it's 5.5. And let me say this, in the event this deal wasn't to go forward, and you were the owner of this much land downtown, you would sell that land for development purposes. It can't be done now because the Sharp building has a lease. So the owners of the land can't develop it because the lease that they own is with the Sharp building, and we would become the successor owner of that lease and the right to exercise the $1 million limit. But ask yourself how much a half block of downtown land is worth. Is it worth $1 million? No, it's worth a good deal more. The smart play then, if you subtract this right, is for this not to be parking, but to be development. The smart play over here is also to be development, and expect the city to cover the costs of providing parking. The cost here is 1.8 to acquire the rights and to make the repairs for another 3.8 million, and to get roughly 330 stalls for, we believe, about 20 years of use. Here, we acquire land which is, I think, if you subtract our role in this and the Sharp buildings, highly developable land, land that is valued in another block of $2.3 million for essentially as part of the package price here. And then it depends on whether or not we come to an agreement with the church here. That means we have a Rubik's Cube. One side of the Rubik's Cube is the Sharp building, and you see the outline of that agreement. One of the elements of that is the exercise of this right in time, and the third is to come to an agreement with the church. If I look older this week than I did in previous weeks, it's because all of those are proceeding at the same time, and we hope to bring you back that ultimate solution. As to what's there now, there are a total at both this garage, and this surface parking lot of about 794 stalls. We would take over the management and control, the efficiency of those, and to that we would be adding ultimately a number of stalls that will replace these, but leave the Eagle parking stalls. So the long-term outcome is 1,200 stalls. The short-term is to gain control of about 794 stalls. There are customers for a number of those stalls, and we do not like to ask people to leave. I don't think we'd expect them to leave. But we would we would be able to control those, perhaps use valet parking to get more energy, more efficiency out of these locations. We'd be able to use these at night in a way that they're not set up to be used now to support retail in the area. So we would get a kind of parking flexibility that does not now exist. There's one last piece of the puzzle. If we go up 6 floors, or better yet 7, we do not have a height restriction that we have exhausted. It is entirely possible in a well-located spot like this that we could reach out to the private sector to join us on a condominium basis and build something rather like the Larson Building, with 3 floors on top, paying taxes and bearing costs, adding to the density of downtown, and on the first floor, an active edge to make sure it fit in with the downtown community. That opportunity exists here, we think, best of all, and provides a long-term urban development growth because of the existence of the garage at this location. If you asked yourself, what did it take the last time we tried to do a project this big? I can tell you that when we acquired all of the land that the city acquired to do the area that we now know as Tower Square and the Larson Building, the land costs were $4 million. The demolition costs were $500,000, and the relocation costs were $1.4 million. If you add all that up, we're not that far away, even though that was in 2011 and 2012. It's not a perfect metaphor. But what it does tell us is that we haven't leapt 50 or 100% in that time, that this is rather like what we've done before, and I hope you would regard the Larson Buildings as successful urban development. I do, and this gives us the chance to do that. I will be back to you by email or whatever as soon as I can give any of the completion of any of the documents that we anticipate, or I can also come to you with a message that says, we've hit the iceberg and we're sinking. And it's time to move on to Plan B. But I can't do that this week. And at a minimum, it might be next week, but we all know what next week holds. We're working very hard to see if we can get an extension so that we can all do this business in August, if at all possible. What questions can I answer for you?
Councilwoman Raybold, and then Councilman Camp.
So Dave, could you just review the Eagle Garage, the blue parcel there? You said 1.8 million to acquire rights, and then did you say
$3.8 million to do a substantial
repair?
things. This is not painting and, replaced some cracked concrete. This is really strengthening the building and giving it 20 years of life that it does not have, not even close. You should consider that this will go away in the very short term unless you do that. And it'll take it out of parking, because I can't imagine that anybody's going to take it over and do this, and make it a parking garage.
Is it currently being used for parking right now?
It is currently being used for parking. There are 326 stalls in it. If you walked in the middle of the day, you'd see half of them occupied. But there are contracts for a number of those stalls. So there are people that are using it. I can tell you that on our waiting list, it's about every person who parks in this garage. Because they would like to either be in a better garage or a city garage than where they are. And that's a fact of life, for a structure that's lived its life in its current form and needs to be significantly redone to get more life out of it.
Councilman Camp.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Landis. Interesting projects and all, and there is a parking need. Not in any particular order, but just so I have my data correct, you said for the, we'll call it the Sharp building block, that it was $5.5 million to acquire it. And so that would give us, at the end of the swaps, hopefully, then it would give St. Mary's those two slots 7 and 8. Now, part of this, at some point, we would demolish all that. That has some office on the first floor, but parking above. So they just have a dirt lot.
Yes, which I think would be highly developable compared to what they'll have if they were to let the lease run. They'd own the garage because it's an attachment to the land. And for any development purpose, you now have a 90-year-old garage with all of those implications on a pretty good site. So I think you would treat it as, I think what our offer to them is, would you like a pad-ready development site at 13th and N? If you do, give us half the land and we'll demolish the building and you can have this site for development purposes.
And so, and you'd set a $25 million estimate to demo the garage, prepare the site, and build the 6-story.
And by the way, the cost of the city's garage at the Larson Building site, the bonds that we did for those, were $25 million of bonds. One of the things that's a little different today than then is that we're sitting on undesignated money, and we should be able to cut into the costs of bonding by at least $3 or $4 million, I'm going to say $3 million, with the resources we have in the parking fund as it exists now. So that would be money that we wouldn't have to bond and save us the interest.
Does the 25 million include the 5.5 to acquire the land in the current building?
I actually think that there's two different bonds, but when I asked that question, the answer was it's acquisition, demolition, and construction. So that's the answer I pass along to you. That's what I asked the same question, and that was the answer that I got from staff who were doing the preparation of the bond analysis.
Could you verify that?
I think, yes, and I too want to verify that. That's a fair question to ask. And we'll now have at least a week to do that, John. I'll go to work on it.
Other questions from the
Oh,
council?
I'm
I'm sorry.
I'm
Keep
sorry, I
going,
was
keep
just
going.
trying to calculate here. Yeah, that would be, okay. I'm trying, okay. That'd be 6 floors now. So right now, we'll go with that $25 million estimate. And then for the Eagle building, you said that was 1.8 to acquire. And when you say acquire, that's to buy, and we would own it.
We own their lease. It's on leased land as well, but the lease runs more than 30 years. If we do our repairs would be under the existing lease, and we would not carry this building out to the 30-plus years of the underlying lease. So while we would acquire, what we would acquire is the ability to have a garage there for 20 years. We don't want to overstate how much garage we get when we're looking at the refurbishment and renovation of an older structure that is in need of serious repair. So it's not like getting a new garage.
And you said there are 326 stalls there?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do some calculations later on what that works
Okay.
out per year, but, and you said it was 3.8 million to repair it.
Yes, that's right.
So we'd be spending 5.6 million for 20 years of 326 parking spots.
That's right. My calculation was about $17,000 a stall. But that's just rough justice. We can do the math for you, John, in
I
a
just
setting not so
want to
busy.
stay focused here, yes, that, but that's just a 20-year time period. and
right.
Then we just walk away.
Yes, I think the building would have had its life, and by the way, for those people who believe that the driverless vehicle is around the bend, we'll be living in their reality. If not, we'll be living in a different downtown than we have now.
So if we acquired the building, there's some retail or office space on the first floor. What would happen to that?
Oh, which location?
Eagle.
In the Eagle location, they'd stay, there's an open area for there, and in fact, we'd anticipate leaving it as retail. And we would actually have control. There's one more site there. And if the city had relocation needs for whatever project, there would be at least one bay of availability at the Eagle parking. The other 2 bays are in use, and we'd continue those uses.
And so we'd get lease payments for those. Okay. Now, isn't one of those businesses the owner of the property, or is there a difference between the ownership of the parking garage itself and then the bank?
I think the ownership is different. There is a travel agency and a printer. And I think those are the occupants of that site.
So 326 stalls for 5.6 million. Okay. On the, you said there were 794 stalls over in the, we'll call it the Sharp lot again.
No, I was adding two numbers together.
Oh,
I was adding Eagle and the,
oh, so how many are on the surface on the south block? The
about
Sharp.
110.
And how many in the garage?
About three, I'm gonna do a rough, I see 324 are the Parkers. There are 361 stalls, there are 324 Parkers at that location.
How many stalls, though?
Oh, 361, thank you.
Yeah.
We also think that with better layout, we can improve that number, but it would, we have that hope, we think there's some unused space. It's also laid out in an odd way in which, when it first began, they had valet parking. So you could park two cars back to back. John, it would be similar to what's in your building where that occurs. And in that situation, it was done with valet parking to get people in and out.
You left us, so we don't have a valet anymore.
I know.
Wait, what?
But I'm sure somebody wants every one of those stalls. In this case, if we used a modified valet system, we might be able to go back to that system and get more usage. But we won't know that until we, take control of it and choose how we'd manage the property.
Now, on all these properties, help me out on the property tax. St. Mary's is a church, but I assume since this is in a commercial context, the business context, they are paying property tax.
They're paying property tax on I think on the income basis, and I think it's being paid on the $10,000 that's being paid there. I don't know, that's a good question. Why don't I mark that down
If you could
for my
find-
list of questions to answer for you.
I'd like to know what the property taxes that would be lost, because you've got the lots 1 through 4, you said, owned by the bank.
Mm-hmm,
And then St. Mary's has, what, the other side, does it have all of it, or?
mm-hmm.
So it has lots.
And won't that occur if we buy land from anybody who's got private enterprise? I've looked at the southeast quadrant, and many of them have 6, 8, 12 owners on a block, all of which are private. And when you get 6, 8, or 12 owners on a block, and you try to assemble half a block, all it takes is one reluctant, and you're into eminent domain. And that's going to occur any place downtown if we take private property and transform it into a civic activity. Let me find the math in this
And
case.
then so you'd have, the property taxes there, and then in fact, maybe you can have the county assessor run off a sheet. I'd be interested if they are figuring on that 10,000 income versus the underlying real estate value.
Mhm.
And then also on the Eagle property, what the property taxes
Same thing
are
on that, sure.
Because with city ownership,
That's right. If we own it or manage it, and it is that situation, let me find out what the property tax implications of that area is as well.
I kind of would assume it might be close to 100,000 a year, but you'll tell me. We'll see. And so the net, when it's done, we will have spent for 20 years, and then we'll still have the Sharp lot, 30.6 million, maybe more. And we would have gone from, I think when I added up those three, the 110, 361, and 326 parking spots, that's 797. And so we'd be going from 797 to 1,200.
That's not where we are. That's not true.
Oh, that's what you-
Let me tell you, I'm sorry, that's a matter of personal opinion.
okay.
Here's what makes me say that. The Eagle Garage doesn't have 20 years of life. Those will go away, and they will go away shortly. You should consider those as subtracting those 320 stalls, because they will not exist in the short term very much longer. If you don't do this, and you leave the bank in ownership of this property, They're not going to leave it as a surface parking lot. It's the bank, and they're not proximate to it, they'll sell it. And when they sell it, who will they sell it to? A developer who will build a building. This will go away if you don't take the opportunity to own it. You can take the current logic, but you have to think, what will the market do with 1/2 of a downtown block that costs $1 million? Somebody will come in and offer $2, $2.5, $3, $4 million and build a building.
What are
That's
they
what's
gonna do,
gonna
what are they
happen
gonna do for parking?
And the parking will go away.
So they're not gonna, but the thing is, the developer will not build a building. It's parking, parking, parking. And if they don't have parking, they won't do what you say. So they'll have to put in their own parking and have offices and maybe parking above, just like what's there now. You can't do that development without parking.
They will, and they'll probably put it into their own cost and want TIF for it, and they'll ask us for it, and then they'll own it, and they won't share it with anybody else. There'll be the absolute minimum for that location, and we won't get any resources for the city. Personal opinion, but that's what I think
Well,
the logic of that use is. John, if you could buy that land for $1 million, you'd do it in a heartbeat. You're too smart not to buy that much land in downtown at that location when at the moment it could be purchased, if you had that right, for $1 million. And then you'd make a plan, but you wouldn't build public parking, you'd build private parking. It's, by the way, the very successful strategy which you have turned into the Camp Empire in Haymarket, because that's
Maybe
exactly
a
what
good
you've
place to
done.
stop. Yeah.
I think we're
Other
calling it.
questions? Yeah.
Okay, well, my point though, I don't know if the present owners are going to sell it without retaining parking rights. I mean, they have to support their buildings.
And if they do, it won't be available to the rest of us. It won't be in a system that can move things around, can make adjustments when the time comes. When we get another opportunity, there might be something there, or manage it in the way that a well-structured system that's thinking about parking 24 hours a day, where it can be used at night, where it can be used in putting hotel use with employment use, which is what we do. We know and calculate the overselling possibility, and we don't know of others who do it. We taught the state government how to do it, and they never did it until we showed them that they could get 20% more value out of their garages if they did their homework, and we had to show them how to do the math.
You remember Ken Smith?
Yes.
Ask him how he learned to do the multiple parking. Who taught him?
Would they be in this room even as we speak, John?
Thank you.
Thank
Are there
you.
other questions of the council? Yes, Councilwoman Gaylord Bear.
Dave, can you just talk us through how the money would flow? Would this come from the parking fund, the 4.5 million, for instance?
We have we have resources inside so the immediate, a good deal of the immediate amount could come out of the parking reserve, but in the end, there will need to be bonds. We can do them in 2 phases, depending on how we want to do it. We can do the short term of the site acquisition and the Eagle repairs, and then when the time is right, we can do the amount to build the large garage. Or those could be rolled into one, if that was the case. There's a portion of this that we can do out of the parking fund and save ourselves interest and do some of the work that's here. But both the short-term and the long-term will require city bonds, either at one fell swoop or in 2 pieces.
And what kind of timeline do you imagine might be possible for getting this garage built, given all the different pieces that you're having to puzzle together?
Yeah. There'll be 2 pressures that will exist, I think, and they'll be at odds. One of those pressures will be build the big garage as soon as you possibly can. I think the downtown employers would like that, and the businesses would like that. I think DLA would say that. And if one acquired this and just said, we're just going to build that big honking thing right now, it would be somewhat beyond 2 years before it could be completed, because it does take design and then construction, and that could be as long as 18 months. If we wanted to do it with a private sector developer to add a layer cake, you can't do the layer cake later. You have to do it when you're building it. So you'd probably want to work in an RFP process and the selection of a private sector developer to add tax base, among other things, to the project. So that could extend it somewhat there. The other pressure is, the more we operate this with the short-term strategy, the more we build up resources for which we do not have to bond. And it saves it saves in the total cost because it will generate revenue. This last year, we had undesignated revenue after all costs of $2.7 million, as I recall. If you add these stalls to that mix, we're going to make more than that per year that passes by, and that becomes a resource that you could use. Someplace between that balancing act is the right time. I don't think you want to wait a long time, but it might be, you might think in terms of 3 years,
Okay.
5 at the outside, something like that.
Thank you.
Councilman Eskridge?
Thank you. Follow up with a question that Lyrian had. The bond payments, would those come out of parking funds?
Yes, although even our existing parking bonds have backup. And the backup is the street construction fund. So we have parking revenue in a year's time at $14.6 million. But we have costs in that by the services that we pay for and the maintenance that we do. And by the way, one of the things that we do is we do the best parking garage maintenance around. But we have a total revenue in the parking fund, if you will, of about $14 million. But I don't think we should think of that as usable. I think when we get done, we've got 2.7 right now. The street construction fund is $69 million. So that's a big backstop. But even after that is the use of other available city funds. If you add all of that backstop, it's why we could get a well-rated bond compared to other cities. Parking bonds in many other cities are B bonds, and ours are A. And one of the reasons is we make sure there's plenty of backstop.
My second question is completely unrelated to the parking issue, but it does concern the sidewalk out on 13th Street and N Street, which is quite honestly not very safe. Is that a city issue, or is it the Sharp Buildings owner's issue? Who needs to address that?
Sidewalks are right of way, and there are issues,
Okay.
generally.
This is covered.
I had a 3-sided Rubik's Cube, but thank you for adding the 4th side to Rubik's Cube.
This
on the right of
sidewalk
way.
is different because it's been covered with a surface that's not our usual concrete sidewalks, and
And I don't
that's
think it's as
deteriorating
long-lasting
and-
as the
No.
designers would have liked for what was put in there.
Okay.
Councilman Camp, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, a real quick
Briefly?
one, yes. You're talking about one of the unknowns are the parking rights that
Both of the, yeah, wait for it. By the way, you'll never guess where it came from. The total amount of annual property tax for all locations that we're talking about, both short and long-term, is $56,000 a year. That's Eagle, Garage, and Surface.
Could you email me a breakdown of that?
You bet.
Boy, I'm
In fact,
overpaying.
not only will I email it to you, but I'll give you my originals.
My question was, you mentioned you're in discussion or negotiations on parking rights that would be retained in the facility by some of the sellers or like the Sharp Building.
Right.
When you're negotiating that, how they might retain, say, access to, is that free? Or how would that be rented, or what conditions
Oh, gosh,
are you
no.
anticipating?
It is our obligation when we take over the place of a previous contractor to maintain the contract that's there. So we've said, look, you've got some existing contracts, we'll honor them. When those lapse, we will use city standard rates for month-to-month parkers. Nobody gets anything for free, if I can possibly help it. We've had many requests but we've always been able to say no. And here's a standard. They're part of a system. They pay the system's rate with the system's terms. We would apply that in this case as well. At the first available opportunity, to the extent that whatever contract rights that exist now, that we are legally bound to honor, extend, and then on a going forward basis, we'd use standard city practices.
I know in the past, we have provided parking in one case for 5 years and then paid for it with TIF, but prepaid it that way. Do you
Yes,
have an idea?
yes, we did prepay at city rates, but we used that mechanism, that's right.
I think there was a present value that was discounted, but regardless.
Well, this isn't a TIF project in any way, so we won't have that wrinkle involved.
Okay.
It's nice to bring you one that doesn't have
But
that aspect.
do you have any idea how long some of those existing agreements might be
I
enforced?
think the longest that we've identified so far, and in fact, they're to provide us with those, is 3 years. But all of them do pay, and they pay according to the contract they have.
So that could, as some of my colleagues were asking about the monthly parking that you were projecting, that could reduce the cash flow.
No, you'd keep the existing cash flow that now generates, and then it would be altered and improved once we were able to bring those, whatever those contracts were, under a standard city contract, because the price would probably go up.
I may have misunderstood you. I thought you were quoting what you anticipated you would get for the parking on a city standard.
Right. We cannot apply that standard until existing contractual rights are done. When you buy this kind of an arrangement and the existing owner has a contract with somebody, it doesn't kill that contract. You have to honor that contract when you become the new owner. We will honor those. It would be our legal duty to do so. Those are paying monthly rent parkers, but at the rate that was negotiated by the Sharp Building, not us. When that ends, we will, at the very first available opportunity, apply standard city rates.
Would you be able to provide us, say, with a 3 to 5 year cash flow then, as those would phase out and you see the city rates going in? Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, thank you. Anyone in the audience like to speak about this issue? Thank you. Teresa, can we move to the next item, please?
Next is 5C, approval of an assignment agreement between the city and Ralph Edwards Productions, whereby Ralph Edwards Productions assigns to the city its lease of lots 1 through 4 and 11 through 12, block 65, including the option to purchase said property from the underlying owner, and authorization of the mayor to exercise said option on behalf of the city.
Ditto.
Great.
Anyone from the audience like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, let's move to the next agenda item.
All right, I'll call items 5D and E together. They're the approving the Downtown Lincoln Association's 2018-19 BID budget and program of work for the downtown and West Haymarket Management and Maintenance Business Improvement Districts, and approving a contract between the city and DLA for downtown management and maintenance services for a 4-year term.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, and the applicant in this case. This is two things, one of which is new and one of which is old. The old part of this is the annual contract with DLA. We do that every year. I will tell you now the surprise ending. Last year plus 2%. That's the story. There's a new part to this, and the new part to this is we did an RFP process at the instigation of our law department. Our relationship with DLA has been very long and very mutually beneficial over time. However, our law department said when we have those kinds of relationships, at some point you need to do an RFP to make sure that other people have a chance to compete for the business. And the time is run, so you need to do that. We did that process. We did an RFP, we described the work that was necessary, and what should be done. The winner of the RFP was DLA. And the agreement, which is 291 pages long, is the relationship and how it's to be done and the standards that are there and the relationship, if you will. Something that if I had been a member of DLA, I would say, couldn't we just keep doing what we were doing? Everybody seemed to like it. Well, the answer is we needed to reduce it to writing and to create a schedule that would permit appropriate private sector competitors to have a chance for city business. So, the old is the existing one-year contract, and there are three parts to it. One of them is the management budget. The management budget is based on assessment to the property holders and only the property holders. There is no city money in this. This is money that we collect through the assessment process, manage through our financing system, account for in our system, and then essentially return to DLA for the expenses that they prove up. And the existing number is $748,750. There is a request to raise that to $762,964, and essentially that's a 2% increase. That's very standard practice. Oh, good, I'm sometimes afraid that it's my phone.
We all
Turned
had-
it off today
we all had that
at the
feeling for a
instruction
moment.
of the chair. There is a line item I was asked about in here that I'd like to explain. And that is a transfer from maintenance to management. Well, here's how that comes about. The maintenance section has the same obligation to prove up how the money's spent and to interact with the city's financing department. But the function inside DLA that does that is the management function, the administrative staff, if you will, and they're in the management section. So the maintenance money pays the management portion of DLA the actual cost of their services rendered on behalf of the maintenance department, which is why this odd little wrinkle is in this line item. The second one is the standard general overall maintenance of the downtown area. The existing amount that we do for that, and it's done by the crack DLA staff who is very experienced with this. $753,856 is what we did this last year. The coming year is $799,159. Again, essentially a 2% increase. This money is shared between the city and DLA, and it is an eyelash from being 50-50 in the distribution of those costs, and that percentage does not change in this agreement. The third idea that's in here is the maintenance cost for a series of projects that the city has done to intensify landscaping and amenities. And this is the city streetscape matrix. You've seen this you've voted on this twice in the last year on what was called enhanced landscaping. But here, it's broken out as a third term. Its current form, the ones that you've previously approved, are $149,383. The proposed for this coming year is $152,371, and those are essentially the same 2% increases. These include general amenities, landscaping, irrigation, and they are in areas that are unique, like Centennial Mall, Tower Square, the P Street area, the N Street Bikeway, places where the projects themselves were oftentimes born in the Parks Department, and for which we might turn and ask the Parks Department to increase their budget and do this, but experience tells us that DLA does this at the most beneficial, most efficient rate that we're going to find. So these particular tasks we think are best given to DLA. They're willing to do it. Their staff is proximate, they're knowledgeable, and they have expertise, which is why that aspect is in this. Are there questions I can answer? And they're also the representative of the DLA board and management.
Councilwoman Raybold.
So Dave, you said that the difference in the maintenance contracts is a 2%, but it seems like it's more like 6%.
There's one term, in fact, I should have done. We used to let DLA use city vehicles to do their work. Our law department said, don't do that. So, thank you for pulling out something I should have said. There is a $30,000 figure for vehicles, which is different than the past and is not previously accounted for. But do you have a number that I should be looking at, Councilwoman?
Well, no, the numbers that you provided, total maintenance bid expense, 753,856, and then projected for 2018, 2019 proposed, it increased to 799,159. And I thought you said it was only a 2% increase, but it's actually a 6% increase, and I'm scanning, I don't know where the vehicle breakout is. Oh, equipment capital replacement, could that be it?
You're down under vehicles.
Oh, I
second
see,
line up from the bottom.
30,000.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, I'm too late. You answered. Yes.
yep, I saw it.
Terry Yulin, Downtown Lincoln Association.
I'd be happy to share the dais if you have
Keep
more
talking.
questions.
Well, we're happy that the RFP process is completed and we're ready to sign a contract. It's substantially the same. We've always had a contract. This one, we updated, in working with the city, we updated some of the maintenance standards. We have a little bit different administrative structure, but remember, DLA was created in a joint effort between the city and the downtown property owners. So we are a single-purpose nonprofit. We really don't exist for any other reason than doing this work and interfacing between the property owners and the city. And the theory was that we could do that better than the city could do it on its own. And I think that's been proven to be a very workable and durable model. So we're happy to be here, and certainly any questions you have.
Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So in item 5D, it talked about the BID budget and program of work for downtown and the West Haymarket management and maintenance for the BID. And are the Haymarket management, are those assessed? Does the city pay any portion of that, or is that JPA?
I think Mr.
I'm not
Williams-
sure.
Yeah.
Are you asking about management functions, Councilwoman?
Sure, the cost, it's a.
Oh, excuse me, I can answer that. On the
Okay.
on the management side, there is, well, there would be some input from property owners, but that would all come from private property owners.
So
Correct,
it'll be
Chris?
assessed all to the property owners in the West Haymarket? Okay.
Yes, it'll be everybody in the downtown area pays the assessment. The management function, which is their advocacy, their branding, their special events, are paid for by the property owners only. But when we get into the maintenance of the landscape and streetscape, that's what we share 50-50.
Okay, and who shares that? Because it says, and West Haymarket management and maintenance.
Chris Connolly, Chief Assistant City Attorney. The
Thank you.
JPA does pay assessments. I don't know what the amount is. I assume it's calculated the same, but there has been a budgeted item.
Okay, so it's not, the city's not paying any portion of that?
Not the
it's
city, right,
JPA?
it's the JPA.
Right, that was my question. Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Councilman Camp.
I'm not sure who of you this would go to, but as I recall, we're in our budget biennial deliberations. And as I was thinking, there was $150,000 in there to replace downtown irrigation. Am I recalling correctly, or?
I've heard that. That's not in this budget at all, correct?
The reason I ask is on the last page of these things under the maintenance section, it calls income for enhanced work and enhanced expenses, and one of the enhanced expenses was enhanced irrigation, but that's only $16,000.
That's all maintenance.
Okay, so
It's not that's not the construction or repair of existing maintenance, of irrigation, rather. You'll see that elsewhere in the city budget.
So am I correct that I recall $150,000 each of 2 years, so $300,000 would be replacing the irrigation?
I have a similar recollection, but it's not because I've seen the number recently. Colin Christopher is here, and we got in his bailiwick.
Colin Christopher, Lincoln Planning Department. There is a capital improvements project. I believe it's actually $200,000 over 2 years, and that would be to address a larger improvement of the irrigation system downtown. Whereas this $16,000 is really meant towards maintenance and very minor repairs.
So what would the 200,000 do?
The 200,000, if you look at a map, and we have it mapped of our current irrigation system in the downtown area, we have a large chunk that is basically inoperable at this point. And so what that means, if you have beds in those areas that need to be irrigated, that can only be done by hand. And DLA does a very good job of trying to massage what is there. But long-term, as we play out, how do we improve maintenance in downtown? The best way to do that is to actually make these major improvements to a system that in many cases is 30 years old at this point and is just not functional. There are also, I believe, a fair amount of beds that don't have any irrigation at all. And so that 200,000 would go to address those beds as well.
Now, would that be similar to what was done on the medians going out to the airport?
In what way?
Well, it has all these PVC tubes in it.
I don't know exactly how the irrigation system would run. It might be a pop-up head, but yes, we are, in the sense that we're taking beds that right now don't have irrigation or have irrigation that just doesn't work. We'd go in there and add to our existing system, feed either drip irrigation or pop-up heads into those beds so that when we put plant material in, we could irrigate them and they would survive.
Just wanted to see it done on the preventative maintenance element.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Aside from the RFP process, could you just summarize again any changes in the scope of work or any changes in this relationship that this represents? Is there anything that we need to be aware of?
Not really. I think the scope of work is pretty similar. We modernized and fine-tuned. There is an oversight committee where where we're calling coordination committee, where I'm dealing with personnel from four different city departments. So you have plenty of accountability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Although I have to add an editorial comment. We do have this contract with the city, but in our mind, our customers are the downtown property owners and stakeholders. And we take our administrative responsibilities very, very seriously with the city, but in our mind, we work for the downtown stakeholders. But we think those two are compatible.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this agenda item? All right. Teresa, we're at the end of the resolution section.
We can vote on these items then?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'm
pardon
sorry.
me a moment. Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. I had one more question on that. If I
Would you
could,
like to come up, Mr.
yeah, if I could have,
Landis?
yeah, Mr. Landis come up.
Would you yield for a question, Mr.
I
Young?
can, and if not, I have a team of experts to help.
Thank you. So I was looking at this, the matrix that we have, and the income for enhanced work said City Streetscape Matrix CSM, and I was just curious, what source is that?
The source of the money, you mean, to do
Yes,
the
when it says
CSM?
City Streetscape Matrix, in quotes,
Yes.
CSM.
Colin Christopher, Planning Department. That is it comes out of the Public Works budget. It's a Public Works Maintenance Fund that has been allocated towards downtown enhancements that go above and beyond typical maintenance.
Okay, so could that be what Councilman Camp was referring to, or?
I think not. I
No.
think John was referring to the irrigation costs, which are in the CIP and not before us.
There is a separate CIP irrigation project. I assume that's what you're referring to.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So where's that, I guess, following up, where would that, that income flows to DLA? And so that, you said Public Works, is that street construction funds or?
It's, the business unit is part of a streetscape maintenance fund, I believe.
What's CSM stand for?
It's a made-up term, but it stands for City Streetscape Matrix. The city underwent in the last couple of years, and you guys are probably aware of this, an initiative to try to do a better job of maintaining our public spaces. And so this was a part of that we would develop a fund out of Public Works. I believe it's $400,000 total each year that can then be accessed either by city departments, or in this case by DLA, on projects that we think need additional maintenance. And it's done essentially on an as-needed basis. In this particular case, we know pretty specifically what DLA's added needs are to maintain downtown at a level that we think is appropriate. And so that $152,000 is basically reflective of that. So there is really truly a matrix that goes by line item to get to the $152,000.
Is that in the CIP or is it in the regular Public Works budget?
The matrix itself is just an internal city staff document, but it's used to develop things like DLA's maintenance budget. So it informs our decision-making on stuff like that.
Where would I find it in the budget book?
It won't be in the budget book. I can give you a copy of it.
It's got to come from someplace, though.
Well, there was a internal city staff group that met regularly to develop this matrix. But when you look at the business unit, and there is a business unit with a budget associated with it, but it's very general. The document that really breaks it down line item by line item isn't in an actual budget at this point.
Assuming the matrix deal.
Okay.
All of us.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we were getting ready to go back to the top and start voting?
Yes.
It's okay. So,
We'll start with item 5A, the amendment number 1 to the construction engineering services agreement with Alfred Benish. This was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
we have a motion by Councilwoman Raybold, second by Councilman Eskridge. Any additional discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 5B is the purchase agreement with American Nebraska Limited Partnership, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Raybold and a second by Eskridge. Any discussion? Was there a need for a delay on this?
Mm-hmm.
Mr.
I'm
Chair.
sorry, thank you, Councilwoman Lamb.
Sure, thank you. We had heard that we need a delay on this one and the next one, so I would move to delay items 5B and 5C with hearing for next week.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb. May I have a second?
Second.
Have a
Second. Can we just
Hopefully
verify
there's enough time.
what the time frame is needed? Is
In the event we do not get a chance to go beyond and into August, which is the hope by all parties, we would need to be able to give a signal by August 1st. So it would be valuable to do that. It would need to be something in which action could be taken that week. So if you wanted to have an open hearing, we could do that, to do the rest, if there's the rest of the story, and you'd want to be accounted for it.
Wednesday, right?
Right, so it would have to be Monday, the 30th.
1 week delay.
Yes.
Right,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
And then, in the event we get more flexibility than that, I will express that to the chair and let you make the agenda as you see fit.
So we have a motion.
Yeah.
You-
And again, I think the
Eskridge.
concern is, if possible, if it's not necessary that we deal with this next week, given our budget hearings, it would be preferable not to have that time taken up.
So I don't understand, so you're suggesting he needs something the 30th, but we don't vote on it, take action the 30th?
No, if he does not need it, then next week we can vote to delay it another week
Yes.
and not.
I understand.
Okay.
Gotcha, thank you.
Other comments?
Did I get a second on that?
Yes, Councilman Camp.
Oh, good,
seconded for you.
thank you.
So I have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb, a second by Councilman Camp to delay these two items for 1 week. Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next then is item 5D, DLA's Budget and Program of Work, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilwoman Raybold and a second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Councilman Camp.
Just by way of disclosure, this costs me a lot of money. So I pay into this fund, so I just wanted to let you know, I don't think I have a conflict of interest since I'm paying into it. Like 15,000 a year I pay for this.
When you
so.
said this cost me a lot of money, that's not what I thought you were going to say after
Oh.
that.
Well, thank you, John.
But
They do a
I do
very good
appreciate what
job,
you're
though.
saying. Yes.
They do a very good job.
Yes.
Would you call the roll, please?
Just gonna add.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Gaylor Baird.
Can just mention how important this partnership is with the city and appreciate the work that the DLA continues to do to make downtown vibrant and exciting, and appreciate their patience through the process that they're required to undertake with the contracting and RFP.
Thank you. Councilman Eskridge.
Yeah, and also full disclosure, I'm a paying member as well. For not many people are downtown at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning after a Husker game, but those who are DLA staff that are downtown cleaning up the streets after whatever's gone on the night before. To see them put our city back in shape after those and many, many other events that we have is greatly, greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Well, I have to congratulate Mr. Eskridge because he cleans from 10th Street East and I do from 10th Street West. Where you're down there.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Item 5E is the contract with DLA for downtown management and maintenance services for a 4-year term, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilwoman Raybold, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Next then are our public hearing ordinances second reading. Item 6A, approving a real estate sales agreement for the sale of city-owned property generally located at 1233 Garden Valley Road.
Is there someone here to, thank you.
Good afternoon, J.J. Yost from Lincoln Parks and Recreation. This is a lot that was originally purchased for access into a potential future neighborhood park, and you may remember during the surplus action, we've decided to locate the park in this residential or square mile of residential development at another location. We then surplus this lot. This is just approving the agreement of sale of the lot. The proceeds will go back into advanced land acquisition and be used for future neighborhood park acquisition. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the council? Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone in the audience like to speak? Thank you. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 6B, approving a license agreement with Verizon Wireless for the placement of telecommunications facilities on city property generally located at 1650 Memorial Drive.
Good afternoon, J.J. Yost, Parks and Recreation. This is an existing cell tower located in Antelope Park, and we will be having an additional provider. It's really just the update of it has multi-providers on the tower today. This is upgrading equipment on that tower, renewing the lease agreement, and actually we're getting an increase in fees with the associated lease agreement, which helps fund our repair and replacement funds. So no new visual difference other than new equipment, both in the ground-based apparatus and that's on the tower.
Councilman Camp.
Good to see you, JJ. What, you mentioned an increased rental fee. How much do we get per year from, say, on this tower, from how many providers?
Yeah, so it varies from tower to tower, so that every lease is negotiated slightly differently, but this one will be $29,000 a year. I believe that's up from the previous, this is one of our original towers on Parkside, so one of our oldest locations, and I believe that original contract, which dates back to the 90s, was in the 14,000 range, so it is a nice increase.
Now, does it vary depending on how many providers there are using the tower?
Well, each provider has a separate contract, and so each of those contracts is about the same amount. So if we get multi-providers on a tower, obviously that tower to us becomes worth more, as much as 3 times as much as if it was a single contract.
Now, did I hear you say there's 6 providers in this tower?
Three providers on a tower.
So roughly $87,000 a year in rent?
Roughly, I'm not sure that all 3 contracts on that tower are of that same amount, but they're all probably somewhere in the 20,000 to between 20 and 30,000. So there's at least 60,000 in rent coming off that tower.
Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa, 6C, please.
Next is 6C, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 18013, application of Lincoln Electric System to amend the 2040 comp plan to declare property generally located at 1040 O Street as surplus.
Thank you. Anyone wish to testify on this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Shanna Sprackling, and I'm the manager of land management for Lincoln Electric System, who is the applicant. We are in the process of getting recommendation and approval for the surplusing of property located at 1040 O Street. And we have, it's about 7,100 square feet of property located at the northwest corner of O Street and North 11th. LES intends to make this property available for private sale and development and does not plan to vacate the property until sometime in 2021, depending on the completion of the new LES Operations Center, which is located out in southeast Lincoln. This request basically is to find the surplusing of the 1040 O Street property in conformance with the comprehensive plan and to declare the property as surplus. We actually went in front of the Planning Commission on June 20th of 2018, and they have recommended and approved that the property does conform with the comprehensive plan, and we are also in the process of putting a historic easement and landmark designation on that building, just due to the nice facade and the historical use of that particular property. And LES is just wanting approval to move forward with that process. Any questions?
Councilman Eskridge.
Yes, thank you. This is a really old building. It doesn't necessarily look like it unless you're in the back, but any idea what the age is of this particular building?
It was built in 1904.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone from the audience like to speak to this agenda item? All right. Teresa, our next item?
All right, next are items 6D through H. They are all related to the property generally located at West B Street and South Folsom Street. We have a comp plan conformance 18012, declaring approximately 0.7 acres as surplus. Change of zone 18016, a change from R2 to P Public. Street and alley vacation 18003, vacating a portion of West B Street right-of-way, generally located at West B and South Folsom. Real estate purchase agreement between the City Parks and Rec Department and Morning Hope, and approving the dedication of reconfigured parkland for Schroeder Park.
Thank you. Before you start, I'd like to point out that Councilwoman Gaylor Baird sits on the board of this organization and has excused herself for this portion of the agenda.
Good afternoon. Nicole Fleck-Tews with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. This is a group of 5 items that relates to the development of a campus area at Schroeder Park that really coordinates this neighborhood park with the existing Willard Community Center and the development of a new site for Morning Hope. So the items are really to facilitate this campus approach that will allow Morning Hope and Willard Community Center to share facilities for programming and to extend some of that programming into Schroeder Park. I think, as you know, Willard Community Center and Morning Hope are both nonprofit facilities that provide neighborhood-based services in the case of Willard and community services in the case of Morning Hope. And we believe that there's a community benefit to reconfiguring Schroeder Park and co-locating these facilities as part of a campus that would integrate and increase sort of those overall benefits, and that they're really complementary services. We do have representatives from both Willard and from Morning Hope here today as well to speak with you about the services they provide, but I thought I would sort of walk through these 5 items and make sure you had an overview of what they covered. So we've got a surplus and sales agreement that are related, the change of zone for the reconfigured parkland, street vacation, and then the dedication of the reconfigured parkland. There were, in addition to these items, there were 2 special permits, one for an updated special permit for Willard Community Center and a new special permit for Morning Hope that were final action before the Planning Commission. And we also have a final plat that would be administratively approved if the council approves these items ahead of that. So that has been prepared as well. All right, so Schroeder Park is about a 1.3 acre neighborhood park. It's west of South Folsom and south of the West B Street right-of-way, and that is undeveloped street right-of-way today. It's also bordered by a parcel of city land located just north of the West B Street right-of-way and just west of Willard that's not currently part of the park. So the boundary of Schroeder Park is proposed to be reconfigured from a east-west alignment to a north-south alignment, and would include the current western portion of the park site, a portion of the proposed vacated West B Street, and then this parcel that is currently not part of the park but is city-owned land west of Willard Community Center. The newly configured park area would be just slightly larger than the existing park, 1.4 acres as opposed to 1.3 acres. And so 2 of the items before you relate to this in terms of rezoning of this reconfigured parkland from R2 residential zoning to P public zoning, and then a resolution to dedicate the reconfigured park area as public parkland. So that's clear moving forward. We're also working on developing a master plan for the newly reconfigured park area. We do have J.J. Yost here for that item as well, if you have any questions, including the relocation of the existing playground. So then the purpose of the surplus is for the sale of about 0.7 acres to Morning Hope along South Folsom Street for their new facility. And then the undeveloped street right-of-way is generally shown in yellow here on this map between Folsom Street, extending west to the western boundary of the park. And that's proposed to be vacated except for the eastern 7 feet to retain as right-of-way along South Coddington, or rather South Folsom Street, if that were to be expanded in the future. The existing parking lot in the eastern portion of that right-of-way would be expanded as part of this effort, be part of the private property, and would serve both Willard Community Center and Morning Hope. The northern portion of the area then that would be vacated is to be sold to Morning Hope. With this vacation, the southern half of the eastern part of the vacated right-of-way, and then this western part of the right-of-way would be retained by the city of Lincoln. But then with the sale of the land that would happen subsequent to the approval of the sales agreement you have before you today, that southern portion of this part of West B Street right-of-way would go to Morning Hope as part of that transfer of land. And that's according to the terms of the purchase agreement on your agenda. As I mentioned, the final plat is also in process. And that would create 3 lots, 1 lot for Willard Community Center with a portion of the northern B Street, half of B Street right-of-way, 1 lot for Morning Hope, and then a 3rd lot representing the parkland. And that would be filed, that's been prepared, and it would be filed after council action on these items. As I mentioned, we've started to work on a master plan, and we've been reaching out to the neighborhood on that, and there was a meeting on July 10th to initiate some of that work. We think we'll be relocating the playground likely this fall, and we'll be also working on other additional neighborhood park amenities for that as part of that master planning effort. We did have a neighborhood meeting related to the surplus and this campus approach at the end of the year last year. And the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board reviewed the proposal in January of this year, recommended approval. Planning Commission also reviewed early in June and recommended approval of these items. We would expect to close on this property by mid-January, I think, as identified in the purchase agreement. And we really feel like this reconfiguration not only promotes this cooperative effort that's really about a public benefit, but it maintains this neighborhood park facility, and in fact it's slightly larger, and as a result is really consistent with the guidance that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board has identified regarding the sale of or transfer of land, of parkland. So it provides a significant opportunity to a partner that provides these community services. It is not diminishing the recreation value of Schroeder Park, and also results in a cash payment for the purchase of the land, and will also be reimbursed for the cost to relocate the playground. So it's no net cost to Parks and Recreation for those improvements. I'd be happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, we've got Janelle Soling from Willard Community Center, Carly Runestad from Morning Hope, and some other folks here to answer questions as you may have them.
Councilman Eskridge.
Yes, thanks, Nicole. We can't usually sell parkland. How are we able to do that in this case?
So in this case, it's very similar to the approach that we took on Jensen Park, where it's really a reconfiguration of the parkland. There's no net loss of the parkland. You're right, we have dedicated parkland existing for the current alignment of Schroeder Park, and what we're doing here is we kind of had an opportunity to do something here because we had this adjacent city property that was not part of the park, but allowed us to do that reconfiguration, and without that we wouldn't have had this flexibility.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this agenda item? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't do a very good job with that. I should have invited you to come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Janelle Soderling, Executive Director of the Willard Community Center. As you know, we just completed our total renovation. We're in there for the summer. The kids are happy. We're all happy. And I want to thank you so much for your support, your continued support of our project. And thank you to many of you that came out to our open house and toured. If you weren't able to do that, I'd be glad to give anybody a personal tour at any time. Our renovation and expansion project added 2,300 square feet to our 100-year-old building. This is going to allow us to offer a lot more programs and services to this under-resourced part of the neighborhood. In fact, we're working together with the Center for People in Need, and on August 18th, we'll have a resource fair at the center from 9 to 12. And we're hoping to bring in lots of resources for the people in that neighborhood. We have Cedars coming and WIC and just a lot of other nonprofits that hopefully will then bring services out to our building for the people in that community. This summer, we have 130 kindergarten through 8th grade children in the building every day to do educational enrichment from 6:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. This fall, we will start our expanded preschool program. We were originally licensed for 30. We'll be able to have 41 preschoolers, and we hope to do a part-time and full-time enrollment there for 3- and 4-year-olds. We will continue to have our pre-K site at 1030 West Q Street, east of Lakeview School, for another 20 pre-K kids that are 4 and 5-year-olds. And then we'll continue to do our before and after school programs at Roper Elementary School and Lakeview Elementary, where we're the lead agency for their community learning center. We also hope to continue our before and after school program for Park Middle School kids. They can come to Willard at 6:30 in the morning. We safely drive them to school, that otherwise they'd have to cross bridges and railroad tracks. So we take them to school, we pick them up after school, give them a healthy snack, help them with homework, and then they're able to walk home from our facility. Our building renovation has brought a lot of new life to this neighborhood. Everywhere I look, there's new home improvements happening in the neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood is getting improved and revitalized. This is a perfect time and opportunity for us to collaborate with Morning Hope and City Parks and Recreation. The three of us complement each other very well, and we work very well together. The idea of a campus for human service partners working together to improve lives shows so much potential for the future. A campus that serves our children and also enhances the whole family in the community. I want to thank you again for all your support. Better partners would be difficult to find. All of you are helping Willard to meet our mission of helping area residents grow, connect, and contribute to our community. We support this project, and we hope that you all do too.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Nope, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Carly Runestad. I'm the Executive Director of the Morning Hope Grief Center. And I just wanted to very briefly tell you a little bit about our mission and our focus so you know what we're bringing into that area as well. So what we know at Morning Hope is that childhood bereavement is very common, and yet it's tragically underaddressed. In Nebraska, more than 1 out of every 18 children will experience the death of a parent or sibling before the age of 18. That translates to about 26,000 children in Nebraska. And what we also know is that that number, that statistic, only reflects parental and sibling death. But when you think about grandparent death and aunts and uncles and close friends, what we know is that most of us will not graduate from high school without having experienced the death of someone significant in our life. We also know that with the right support and interventions, that these kiddos can go on to live healthy and engaged lives. They can not only strive, but they can strive. We also know that without the proper support, that the statistics can be really detrimental. So Morning Hope's actually been in the community for about 24 years. We've been here a long time, and we're a grief support network for children, teens, young adults, and their caregivers who've experienced the death of anyone in their life. So we typically work with kids between the ages of about 5 through 18. We work with their caregivers, and then we work with young adults as well. One of the great things about Morning Hope is that all of our programs and services are offered free of charge. They have been for 24 years. So everything we do out there is that way, and we want that to remain in that fashion. We know that when families seek our services, that over 50% of the time a parent has died, so they're suddenly dealing with that loss of that second income stream. We also know that they're dealing with funeral costs, medical bills, insurance. So when we're able to say that our programs are offered free of charge thanks to the generosity of the community, you can instantly hear that relief in that caregiver's voice. So I mentioned that we'd been in the community for about 24 years. The last 11 years, we've actually rented a space from Nebraska Wesleyan, a 110-year-old Tudor-style home. We love the ambiance. We love that setting. It's wonderful in many ways. But as you might suspect, on an older house with no air conditioning, it's a little warm right now. It's also quite cold in the winter. But the big issue that we have is that we don't have enough space there, and we haven't had enough space for quite a few years. We've had wait lists for quite a few years for almost all of our programs, and there's pretty much nothing worse than having a mom call you in January saying, my husband died, I have 4 kids, I'd like to get my kids into your program right away, and us having to say, well, our next available opening is in late March. That's not who we want to be, that's not where we've wanted to be, and so we've spent a couple of years trying to figure out what our next step is, and I know that I have a limited time, and you've been here a long time today, so I won't go through every step that we be looked at, but I would just tell you that we did, look at purchasing potential space in the community that's already established, but then we run into zoning issues, we run into parking issues if we're needing, 20 parking spaces, we run into ADA accessibility issues. We looked at some commercial spaces, but that wasn't the right fit. We really wanted this Tudor-style home. We wanted a that looked like and felt like a home for our families that come through that door. And so when this area presented itself at Folsom and West A, we were delighted. It's such a perfect fit for us to be able to build our forever home, not only for the families that we serve, but for that neighborhood, and to be able to partner, as Janelle said, with Willard and Parks and Rec. And it's just such a wonderful fit for all involved parties. So we hope that with your blessing that we'll be able to build our forever home. And I just want to thank you very much for letting us come this far and hopefully continuing.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak about this agenda item? Okay. I think we're ready to move on.
All right, if not, we can move into the voting session then with our ordinance's third reading. Item 7A.
What Councilwoman Gaylord Baird would vote on the first part and then leave for the last part?
No, this is.
We need to get her back.
Oh, she can come
All right,
back.
never
Yeah.
mind. Yep, you're right. We just do need to get her back, though.
Yes.
Jeff's doing it.
These are only ordinances on second reading.
All right, we'll go to item 7A, change of zone 18019, application of Stephen and Sarah Schott for a change from H3 Highway Commercial to R2 Residential on property generally located at 1340 Furnace Avenue, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved. Second?
We have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there a discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Item 7B, amending the pay schedule for the employee group whose classifications are assigned to the pay range, which is prefixed by the letter A, by changing the title of Class 2040 from Utilities and Safety Training Specialist to Safety and Training Specialist, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Next then is item 7C, amending the pay schedule for the employee group whose classifications are assigned to the pay range, which is prefixed by the letter A, by creating the classification of Assistant Transit Manager, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0. Next then are resolutions for action only. Item 8A, resolution directing the mayor to solicit proposals to purchase Pershing Auditorium, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Discussion? Councilman Camp.
No. This is the resolution, as was stated, regarding the way to market and possibly sell the Pershing block. And we have before us, and I think each of you has received a copy of the latest version, and it's on the front and the back sides. First of all, I want to thank a number of people. My colleague Carl Eskridge has been very helpful, and we've worked through different wording, and also some of the latest version is the result of David Landis looking at this. I think that what we've come up with is a good, viable approach. It takes out some of the directive language in there, but it does set up a timetable here to forward look on the Pershing block, and then specifically, an interesting feature that I've learned a little bit more about is the.
Could we have a formal motion and second?
Oh, I thought I moved.
We have a motion second on the, but not on the amendment yet. We have one on the
Right.
original motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's true. Okay, I'll move motion to amend number 3.
Thank you.
A motion to amend by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge.
Thank you.
Councilman
Okay.
Camp, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, yes, as I was saying, though, basically, this starts the ball rolling. And 15 days after passage, there needs to be some action. And part of this, too, would be to have an IHRP, which is an informal, the H again was imitate IFRP, an invitation for redevelopment proposals. And initially, I'd had the RFP and the request for proposals. This is a more flexible approach, and I want to thank Mr. Eskridge especially on suggesting this alternative. Basically, what we'll be doing is having the city issue a new invitation for this redevelopment proposal, and that will give those parties who are interested the ability to define what type of projects they want. And this is opposed as to having a RFP where we would specify what we want. And I think that that will give a lot more latitude and open the door to many more businesses or other entities coming to the table. And it's not necessarily limited to the private sector. This could be proposals coming to us. And then the council would be the ultimate decider of this. So I want to thank again Mr. Eskridge and several city staff people were helpful in this.
Councilman Eskridge.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, John, for bringing this forward. Pershing site has sat empty for too long. And it's time to see what we can do to find the best proposal out there to serve the needs of the city. Whether it's a public project or a private project, we'll find the best option for the use of this space. It's exciting, very, very exciting to see what happens to the Pershing location.
Thank you. Other comments, discussion from the council? Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. Well, I do agree that Pershing's been sitting empty too long, and I was excited actually when we had a hearing on this a couple of weeks ago because we got ideas that came forward, some of which perhaps we've heard before, but ideas about making sure that we have food and groceries there, public-private partnerships. I got calls afterward, people interested in perhaps doing an indoor BMX track downtown in order to attract tourism. So it is exciting to have it at the forefront again and have people considering proposals that they're going to bring forward, and I'm going to support this. Thank you very much for working on this, gentlemen.
Other comments from the council? So I'll remind you, we have a motion to amend by Councilman Camp and a second by Councilman Eskridge. And shall we call the roll, please?
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
And now back to the original amendment, original motion, excuse me. Motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Would you call the roll, please?
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Item 8B.
Yes, next then is item 8B, which is the report of claims. We had the two claims carried over from last week for Cheryl Herrig and Robert Worthen.
Yes.
And as they are
yeah.
listed on the resolution, it was introduced by Gaylor Baird.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second?
Have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird, second by Councilman Eskridge. Is there discussion? Councilwoman?
No.
No, please, no.
Well, I was going to get Jeff to clarify. If we vote yes, that means I believe that these two claims were in the denial
Correct.
category. So,
They're recommended, Jeff Kirkpatrick, Lincoln City Attorney, they're recommended for denial. The resolution that's before you has those two claims on it, and it is under the denial list.
okay, thank you.
Councilman Camp.
Yes, I was just going to ask if there's any new news or information since last week when we.
Well, you should have received information that Liz Elliott in our office forwarded, I think, to all the council members regarding both of the claims. That was supplemental to the information I provided last week. Be happy to answer any questions regarding either claim.
Councilwoman Lamb.
Yeah, so I did receive the additional information, thank you. I wish the claimants were here, but because typically if they come and testify and then we do vote to deny a claim, they have opportunity to have a conversation with you about what their next step might be. Do they have an opportunity to have that? If we vote today, will they get a call or a letter, or what exactly, if we vote to deny this, will happen with these claimants?
You know, I don't know. I don't think we send them out, this is a public action. But you may recall that during the hearing last week under questioning by Councilman Christensen, I specifically talked about their recourse. If this claim is denied, that they could go to court, district court, and file a claim there. This was brought up specifically with Mr. Worthen's claim.
And I understand that. The only thing is they were pretty emotional about their claims at that point, and so I don't know how much of that they really would have heard. Is it possible, so if we deny this today, will they get a letter at all?
Well, we can make sure that they receive letters, both of them.
Okay. And then they will be able to call if they have questions about any next steps they want to take? Can that be part of that letter?
Sure.
Okay.
Although there's a limit to how much legal advice we could offer them. Obviously.
I understand. I just, you know, you and I, we all know this isn't necessarily the end of the road for folks, but they don't always know that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other conversation?
Thank you.
Discussion? So a yes vote is a yes to deny these claims.
Correct.
And we have a motion by Councilwoman. Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Our resolutions on first reading are items 9A through D. Ordinances first reading are items 10A through B. Our pending list date certain are items 11A and B. They are both coming off on August 6th. Our regular pending list are items 12A through C.
Mr. Chair, I would move for adjournment.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilwoman Raybold to adjourn. Would you call the roll, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
We are adjourned.
Trust.